Good evening, everybody. My name's Kimberly Knight. I'm the Assistant Director with the Chesapeake Public Library, and
And I'm Maiko Medina, the IT Manager at the Chesapeake Public Library. Welcome, everybody.
okay, we're here to tell you about a partnership we recently started with the Chesapeake Public Schools. Oh, it's not? Okay. I knew it. They tried to give me the other thing because I am bad about holding it up. We're here to talk to you about a partnership that we developed with the Chesapeake Public Schools to try to bring down barriers to access to students, okay? So our director was not here at this conference, so she said, Assistant Director, go ahead and take the reins, although she was the person who actually put together this partnership. When she first arrived at Chesapeake Public Library about 18 months ago, she realized that some of our policies were a little bit restrictive and maybe put up barriers to people being able to use the library. So some of the first things she did was sit down with the staff to brainstorm ways to fix our policies and make it so that we were more open to everyone. So she removed the fees that people had to pay if you didn't live in Chesapeake. So people from all over the Chesapeake in Hampton Roads area can use our library for free. We looked at our fine structures, and sometimes people were being sent to the treasurer's office for like $15 or $20. So we raised that to $200 before you went to the treasurer's office. And then the next thing we started looking at is like, who else is having trouble using the library? And that's when we really started looking at school students, because oftentimes when they're young and before they know anything about how the library card works, a parent or a grown-up in their life will borrow with their card, and then their card is blocked, and they're not able to use the library. I had an experience similar to that when I decided to jump on the circulation desk to help, and one student out of a class of about 30 was having trouble with their card, and the staff was ready to send that child home without a book. And I knew that we could not do that. So we sat down and talked about how to create this partnership that would allow school students to have fine-free cards that would allow them to use the library at all times without the stress of fines and fees.
But let me just, before we go over any of the parameters or any of the details of this program, we just kind of want to tell you guys about what Chesapeake Public Library looks like in terms of, we have 7 library locations, and we do more than $1 million in circulation. And after we actually started this program, we obviously increased our student
Cardholders,
to more than 200,000, because we added another 41,000 to it. And we're going to go over basically the parameters of what went on and what we needed to do in terms of creating this partnership with the schools.
Because as you can believe, we probably had a little pushback from staff. People were concerned, would we be good stewards of the library's money if we were able to open it up? And people were afraid we were going to lose thousands of dollars worth of materials. And at the time that we started these slides, we had data that we'd only lost one item. And now the numbers will run again, and Maiko can tell you how many items we've lost now in the 8 months we've been doing this project.
It's about 8 months, and so far we've lost about 17 items, but we're talking about thousands and thousands of items here, and a value of maybe about $200. And so we're thinking it's still a good return on investment in terms of what we're trying to do here.
I wanted to tell you, as we talked a little bit before, staff had questions like, well, are we going to let them take DVDs? Are they going to be able to take games? We knew that some library systems close by and library systems that I worked for in the past only allowed the student to take out electronic materials. But our director, and you'll see her picture at the end, she likes to do everything to the highest power. So she's like, we want to beat everybody else, and we want to offer them physical items too. So they can check out at least one of our launch pads, they can do DVDs, they can do games, and then they can do within their 5 items mix, they can also do the electronic resources. So that was one of the things that we were able to work out. We had to work out some compromises for the schools because they didn't want, of course, to say, here, take our data from the students. So we had to have some conversations with them about how far we would be willing to compromise to make this happen if they couldn't give us everything about the students. And then, as I was telling you before, we had a lot of internal issues and concerns that we had with staff, not one being, how will we all make this work with our existing catalog?
And so I don't know if Kimberly had mentioned that, see, the both of us actually came from systems that offered this partnership. And so we took some of that, some of the stuff that we learned from that experience over to Chesapeake. And so when we actually had to meet with the schools, and this is going to be the important thing about this whole program, is actually making sure that you do have this really strong relationship with the schools and building that trust with them, because I've spoken with another library system within our area. They're having trouble trying to get the schools to give up the data that we're going to need to create these library cards. And so really having that partnership and having that trust with the schools, you really have to make sure that that really happens, because when we went in there, we told them exactly what we're going to need, but obviously they're going to be concerned about privacy and how are you guys going to handle the data that we're giving you. And so we had to make sure that they could trust us in getting that information from the schools. And so after all that, I mean, there was a lot of back and forth, and I know from the places that have done this before or currently are doing this, there was a lot of work going into the whole arrangement of getting the data from the schools and making sure that they feel secure about the information they're giving us. And so they were actually willing to give us not just the library card numbers, the student card numbers from the students, but also the name, and they even gave us a 2-digit code for the schools because it made it easier for us to do statistics on it, which is not something that a lot of schools would give. Like I said, I mentioned that one school system that wasn't even willing to give anything because they were so afraid about what's going to happen to the data. And so, but we made sure that we talked to them about it and said, hey, we're going to make sure that we protect this data and we're not going to share any of this data to anybody.
Right.
And so one thing that we actually did too for setting this up and is explaining to them what the benefits are and obviously what the card was going to provide the students, that basically help with the selling of this whole idea. So basically we allow them to check out up to 5 items, access to all the databases, and no fines on them unless they obviously lose the item.
The other thing that I want to make sure we're being clear about is that the kids don't have to carry around cards. Because if you've ever worked at a desk, they're always losing it or forgetting it. They actually use their student ID number, which many of them have memorized in kindergarten, because that's the way you get your lunch. And so they know that number. So they can come in and use our library and our databases using their student number, and it goes with them from kindergarten all the way up to graduation. So they have that with them at all times. And I also want to make it clear, we don't have the addresses of these kids. We don't have their parents' information. Our library director had to be really bold and to really have her eye on the prize for what we wanted, which was to bring down barriers to library access. So we stepped out on faith that we wouldn't lose thousands and thousands of materials while at the same time opening up access. And we're really proud that we were able to do that. And as we said before, we've only lost 17 items at this point.
17 items and about $200 worth.
So I have 2 impact stories for you because we're all into impacts, right? So before we started the student card program, we had a young man who had a library card and lost some materials or had some fines when he was like in elementary school. And when he was a teenager, he got his first job at McDonald's, and he was so excited for his first paycheck, only to find out that his first paycheck had been garnished because of library fines. Thanks to our lovely treasurer's office, they really do their work. So it was the kind of impact story that none of us want to hear, and we don't want to see that on our social media, and we don't want to create 100 people who hate the library for one story like that. So we do have a good impact story. It happened at our South Norfolk Library, and it's one of our, you can see the data for South Norfolk. It has lower socioeconomic, higher levels of diversity, higher unemployment rate. we had a family of little girls at the library who were carefully picking out materials, and they were telling the librarian how happy they were because they had never been able to take anything home before because they have a mother who works or whatever, and she wasn't able to come with them to sign for them to get a traditional library card. So this was the first time that they actually got to take some materials home. But not only were they taking things for themselves, they were also picking things for their younger siblings. So with this act, we were giving them access to materials, and we were helping grow younger readers in their households. And who knows, maybe they'll take something from mom too at some point. But that was one of our happiest impact stories that we were able to tell thanks to this program. And we think that the polar opposites that happened were well worth it, right?
Exactly.
So the lady in the middle is the library director that I was telling you about, and she is as bold as she looks. And so it was her that listened to what everybody said and calmed everybody's fears, and actually rode the schools, because sometimes you lose contact. So she kept on emailing them, calling them, and when she's on your trail, you will not get away. So, just her steadfastness helped make it happen. And she wasn't here, and so we jumped in, and we're here to answer any of your questions.